All right there, econ friends, welcome back. In this video, we're going to jump into an area of resource economics and labor economics that's tied to what we call cost minimization. Okay, there's going to be a little bit of logic and a little bit of basic math involved. Not too bad. What I really want you to take from this one, though, is just kind of the general way that firms minimize cost. I probably won't give you anything on exams about this, but I need you to know it because it also has implications, again, for your future work and career, okay? So let's jump into that, okay? Let's go. So basic idea here, even though up to now we've been talking just about labor and we're going to return to labor, the reality is that most production typically entails using multiple types of resources, okay? Most production requires that companies combine and employ land resources and labor resources and capital resources, and they have to combine them. You might remember from early lectures, we had the big three questions, right? And question one was what to make, and question two was how to make it, and question three was who gets it. Look at question number two. Not what to make, but how to make it. And the idea behind the how to make it question was that firms can produce goods in lots of different ways, which basically means that they can choose different ways to take land and labor and capital and combine them. Some processes are very human focused with lots and lots of labor and minimal machinery. Other companies take a more technology-based approach for the same product with lots of capital and technology and fewer workers, okay? So at the end of the day, anytime a firm is using multiple types of resources, what it's gonna look to do, it's gonna look, and again, let's go back one more time, profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. So the goal is to minimize total cost, right? Okay, so with that context said, if a firm is going to employ multiple types of resources in the production process, it's ultimately going to try to combine those resources in such a way as to minimize the total cost of production. Okay. Now, how does this happen? Well, we can take this like from a philosophical lens and then put a little bit of basic math to it. If a firm, let's do the philosophical first. If a firm is minimizing costs, then what this means is that spending an additional or marginal dollar on one resource will have the exact same impact on output as spending an additional dollar on another resource. What this means, let's say that a firm has money to spend and can choose to spend it on labor or on machinery. If a firm is minimizing its cost, that means that it is currently using the mix of resources such that spending an additional dollar on one resource would have the exact same impact as spending an additional dollar on another. Okay, seen a different way, we can say that firms will minimize costs by combining the different factors of production such that the marginal physical product, the output, for the last dollar spent on each factor is the exact same for all the factors used. How about this? Think about the idea of bang for the buck. You're a business owner. You have some money to spend. You can either hire new workers or buy a new tool or machine or factory or technology piece. You're going to ask yourself, for every dollar that I spend, which of these resources, the labor or the capital, will give me the most bang for the buck? Only when the bang for the buck for all the different resources is equal are you minimizing your total cost of production, okay? We can summarize this in this very fancy equation, which is not that hard. We're gonna call this, my friends, the cost minimization rule. We believe in economics that production costs are minimized whenever the marginal physical product per dollar spent on every input is equal. Let's do a little simple analysis here. Let's say that L is equal to land resources. Actually, let's not do land. Let's do labor. Let's say that L is equal to labor resources and K is equal to capital resources. You're a business owner. Let's just say that you happen to have $1 that you're able to spend. You say, okay, I want to make some investments in my company. I'm going to deploy this dollar. I can either hire a worker or I can buy a machine. I can either invest in labor or I can invest in capital, because labor is workers and capital is machines, okay? You get the idea. Let's say furthermore that your resources, that your research told you that given your production process, if you hired one worker, the marginal physical product of that labor would be 10 units. But that if you hired or bought a machine, the marginal physical product of the capital would be 5 units. Which one would you buy? Well, they're not equal. Think about the bang for the buck right here. You can spend $1 on a worker and get 10 units, or spend $1 on a machine and get 5 units. Clearly, you would say, I'm going to employ, I'm going to hire the worker. Let's go back to our ratio. In this case, the marginal physical product of labor divided by the price of labor would be the 10 units divided by the $1, which is 10. And the marginal physical product of the capital divided by the price of the capital would be the 5 units that the capital gave you divided by the dollar you spent would be 5. In this case, they're not equal. The marginal physical product of labor is going to exceed that of capital. In other words, as a business owner, you're going to say, I'm hiring a worker and screw the machine, at least for now, because you're going to get more bang for the buck, right? More output for the dollar spent, more bang for the buck on the worker. In this case, where the marginal physical product of the labor exceeds that of capital, you're going to deploy your $1 on a worker. But notice something important. As you hire that worker and maybe hire even more workers, diminishing returns is going to kick in. And over time, as you hire more and more workers, the marginal physical product of your workers will fall, diminishing returns. At the same time, let's say that you move some money from your capital to hire workers. So you pulled money out of capital to hire workers. Well, that's going to be the opposite of diminishing returns, because as you utilize less capital, the marginal productivity of capital will go up. You're going to keep making these adjustments, hiring more of one and less of the other, until the bang for the buck of each resource is equal. It's only when you achieve this condition, where the bang for the buck of labor equals the bang for the buck of capital, it's at that point that your costs are minimized. Because by definition, at that point, you cannot move resources around in any way that lowers your cost anymore. So the primary rule, the cost minimization rule, is simply this. As long as the productivity per dollar spent, as long as the bang for the buck for one resource is greater than another, hire more of that resource and less of that one. You keep doing that until the bang for the buck equals. And that, my friends, is the cost minimization rule. Now, you might be asking, what does this mean? Well, it means a couple of things, because we can take this basic idea here and let's just do a little extension. Okay, most econ textbooks focus on labor and capital, right? L and K all the time. But let's do a little bit of an extension. Let's suppose, because the rule still applies, let's suppose that a firm is using a factor called factor A and factor B and factor C. Let's suppose that factor A is skilled labor. You guys who will have bachelor's degrees and good training and a damn good economics preparation, thanks to this guy here, right? And let's say that factor B is unskilled labor. And let's even throw out factor C, which we'll call outsourced, or maybe we're going to call it offshore labor, where a company moves some operations to a foreign country, okay? The point I'm making, my friends, is this rule here, very important. The bang for the buck concept, very important. But don't get hung up just on labor and capital. You can apply this rule to any factors, and you can be really creative as a business owner or manager, or as a prospective worker looking for a job, in how you define resources. So in this simple thing, we just made up factors A, B, and C, where A is skilled labor, B is unskilled labor, and C is outsourced or offshore foreign labor. The same rule applies. The business owner would deploy those resources in such a way as to where the bang for the buck for each one is equal. In this case, you would do it until the marginal physical product of A divided by the price of A equal the marginal physical product of B divided by the price of B equal the marginal physical product of C divided by the price of C. In other words, you would move around resources and allocate in different ways until you reached a point where the bang for the buck was the same. This is really important because it gives you a lens as a manager, for example, on how to think critically about resource use. You can go beyond traditional labor and capital metrics and really refine your analysis. Notice also that this starts to give us a clue as to why workers with different skill levels earn different wages. One of the problems, if you stick with just labor as labor, it makes it really hard to understand and analyze wage differences, the fact that some workers make more than others. But once you realize that you can do the cost minimization analysis and that you can parse out, divide out your resources in many ways, now it makes more sense. We just said here that A was skilled labor and B was unskilled. Now we're starting to get some ideas as to why workers with different skills can earn different wages. If, for example, skilled workers are twice as productive as unskilled workers, they're more experienced, they're more educated, whatever it is. We don't need to know the reasons now. But if we had a situation, which is the real case in the real business world, where skilled workers are more productive than unskilled workers, then our cost minimization rule, our bang for the buck rule, would predict that the wage rates for those skilled workers would be more than those for unskilled workers. This gives you a lot of clues, both as a potential manager one day on how to organize your production to maximize your profits, but critically, it should be giving you some food for thought. If you know that the bang for the buck rule can be extended to show that different skill levels lead to different wages, and that if you're twice as skilled as somebody, you might make twice as much as them, you're going to want to always be thinking, both as an undergraduate, through grad school, and into lifelong learning, how can you be as efficient and productive as possible? Because that's where your salary, that's where your healthy income, that's where your rich, thriving life will come from. Okay? As a quick sum up then, let's finalize it. Just to sum it up quickly, we believe, based on this video and some previous ones, a couple of big concepts. Concept number one, resources will only be employed if they generate enough revenue to cover their cost. In other words, that's the marginal revenue, marginal cost rule that is setting the MRP of labor equal to wage, okay? Resources will only be employed if they generate enough revenue to cover their cost. And number two, critically, resources that are more productive will always be able to command higher prices. In the case of labor, wage rates. There's some food for thought. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. I'll see you next time.